Since starting this channel back in 2020, there is perhaps no other laptop series that are reviewed more than Dell's Inspiron series. After all, there are so many of them out there, which brings us to today's machine, which is the latest Inspiron 14 5000 laptop. The configuration I have here in particular is rocking the 1355U i5 chip. We also have 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X memory, a modest 512 gigabyte solid-state drive. We do also have Intel's Iris Xe integrated graphics, Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5 standards, and of course this is a 14-inch display. Now the Inspiron 14 has a lot to prove for itself because the mid-range competition is as fierce as ever, and we're going to see if this laptop has what it takes to make a mark in that segment. So let's get started. Starting with the unpackaging experience, the Inspiron 14 comes in a very generic and boring looking box, though I wasn't expecting much to begin with. Anyway, once you remove the content seal, behind all that protective packaging, you will finally find the Inspiron 14 in the flesh. It is a pretty little piece of hardware, but let's get on to that in just a second. Past that, you do have a 65-watt charging adapter, which is pretty respectable, though unfortunately you still get a small barrel charging connector as opposed to USB-C charging out the box. Just makes my heart a little sad. With that said, you also of course have the wall outlet charging cable piece, and finally some basic documentation, which, let's be honest, you couldn't care less about. In terms of looks, this machine has a very familiar look, especially when compared to the previous two generations of Inspiron 14 laptops. You still have that highly premium 2/3 metallic exterior design, those sharp linear edges, that narrowing asymmetrical design as you get towards the end of the laptop, with just a very generally professional yet ultimately assertive look going on here. I personally really like this laptop. It often looks more premium than some of the competition when compared to the likes of the IdeaPad or Pavilion, for example. Now this laptop does have a fairly heavy weight of about 3.4 pounds, and that can be a little bit heavier depending on which configuration you get, so I wouldn't exactly call it the lightest 14-inch laptop. Now with that said, starting with the top side, you have a nice metallic exterior surface. Like I mentioned, there's no particular texture, but that silver color does look quite nice. I have noticed that Dell has gone a little bit more subtle with their logos this year. On the side of this laptop is where you'll find all the I/O ports housed. So on one side, you have the DC charging port, followed by an extremely primitive HDMI 1.4 port, and you can only have a maximum output of 1080p with this, again, super primitive port. Next to that though, you do have a USB-A 3.2 port, and then a fully loaded Thunderbolt 4 port with DisplayPort and power delivery. On the other side, you have a universal headphone jack, one more USB 3.2 port, and then next to that you have a full-size SD card reader. Now I'm quite happy about the I/O port diversity here, but that HDMI port should have been at least a 2.0 or higher standard. That is a little disappointing in 2023. The bottom side of the laptop is pretty standard stuff, so you have a basic plastic surface finish, and then you'll notice you have two center-based air intake vents. Despite being called a laptop, if you put this on your lap, the laptop will overheat because the vents get directly blocked. Ironic, but that's the way it's designed, unfortunately. As soon as you unfold this laptop, you realize that Dell has given you all the possible palm rest space you could ask for on a little 14-inch laptop like this, and a nice high-quality metallic exterior. Unfortunately, the same geniuses also plopped it with massive stickers all around to hide all that beauty. I don't know what the logical process is, but here we are. Now, at the center of it all, you have this generously spaced trackpad. Look at all the surf real estate you have over here. And not just that, while it may not have a glass surface finish, this is a very tactile trackpad. The clicks are nimble yet crisp. And even though it's plastic, there's a relatively limited amount of flex. This generally gives me hope that a plastic trackpad does not necessarily have to be finicky or cheap, as it's really well implemented over here. Hey everyone, just wanted to mention the fact that everything from procuring items like these to reviewing them to pretty much producing all the footage you see on screen, editing it, and ultimately publishing it is done entirely by me on those long weekday nights after I'm done my day job. It takes a lot of time and effort, and while I do enjoy it, I would truly appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video. It keeps me motivated and also helps secure the future of this channel. You guys are the reason I do this. Thank you so much for your support and viewership. Won't take any more of your time. Let's keep going. The keyboard is even better. It looks really nice with those light gray keycaps. Additionally, you have a decent amount of surface area per keycap. They're really well labeled. It's a fully backlit keyboard, though the backlighting is slightly on the weaker side, but that's a minor inconvenience at most. You have a built-in fingerprint scanner, which also doubles as the power button, and the key layout is quite respectable. The typing experience is so nice. It's tactile, you have a decent amount of key travel, and it's a great keyboard overall. Believe it or not, this keyboard right here is far superior to the top of the line 2023 Dell XPS 15, for example, which has flex. It's a finicky keyboard and has a ton of other issues. How that's possible, I have no idea. But the good news is, if you're trying to buy this laptop in particular, you're getting a fantastic keyboard. Past the keyboard, you have a pretty well-tuned hinge system. There's a limited amount of wobble. It's fairly well calibrated and should be fine in the long term. As far as display fitting goes, at the very bottom, you have a fairly thin chin. Thankfully, Dell doesn't waste any space putting unnecessary branding. You'll also notice you have nice narrow bezels that look modern and clean. And then at the very top, you have a fairly thin forehead, at the center of which you will find an amazing full HD webcam. And you also have a privacy shutter. It's honestly a pretty high quality webcam. Another fun fact for you, the latest Dell XPS 15 has a 720p webcam. This one has a 1080p one. Clearly there's an A team and a B team, and it seems like the A team was the one that developed this laptop. The XPS 15, yeah. Every laptop has an Achilles heel. For some, it's more obvious than others. In the case of the Dell Inspiron 14, it's the display. Things start off fair enough, as you have a 1920 by 1200 Full HD Plus resolution, which gives you a nice 16 by 10 aspect ratio. Additionally, you have a high quality IPS panel here with some pretty nice viewing angles. Now you are stuck with a base 60 Hz refresh rate, all of which isn't too bad. Now, where things get depressing is that you have a peak brightness of just 250 nits. The problem here is that you don't have enough brightness to overcome bright daylight settings or bright settings in general, and you'll end up getting a lot of glare even at the highest possible brightness setting and despite having a matte finish display. But to really take a dump on your day, you only have a 56% sRGB rating. Basically, this thing is about as colorless as a 9-to-5 office cubicle. I would not recommend it for any sort of color sensitive activity. It's just not going to be ideal in those cases, but it'll be fine for pretty much anything other than that. These 13th gen chips are no slouch. Even this lower mid-range U-series i5 chip here is quite capable. So obviously day-to-day activities like web browsing or word processing are going to be no task at all for this machine. But more demanding activities like programming on Python, for example, or let's say doing full-out 3D modeling are not only possible, they actually work in a very smooth fashion on this device, to my surprise. Even the most demanding of activities like multi-layer 4K editing on DaVinci Resolve is very much possible. Granted, there are occasionally some frame drops, but again, it's a very possible experience and you can use it for those activities if you really want to. Now, to be fair, I do have 16 gigabytes of memory here as opposed to the base 8, so I'm sure that's making a bit of a difference as well. What really impressed me is the improvement in, well, integrated graphics here. So for example, games like Fortnite are able to sustain a healthy 60 frames per second on average, running at lower settings, and this was something that we didn't have with the previous generation, which used to run around 30 FPS. It's almost twice as many frames per second at lower settings, which is quite the dramatic improvement. Now, thermals isn't as nice a story. So under unrealistic peak loads, you can hit a maximum surface temperature of just around 44 degrees Celsius, though realistic sustained loads will yield you around 40 degrees Celsius, which, while not the hottest number, is far less than ideal. But the real crime here is that fan. So it frequently goes on. It can hit maximum noise levels of over 52 decibels, which is insane for a single fan setup, and it's always on. I swear, anytime you do anything more than just basic web browsing, it's ready to go on. And this is of course a greater problem. A lot of 13th generation Intel chips that I've noticed that they run far too hot to achieve a high level of performance. But make no mistake, this is a very loud laptop for its size and specifications, and you definitely will hear that fan more often than you'd like to. With a 54 watt hour battery, you can realistically expect about 7 hours of relatively light load usage on a single charge. Now, what's truly impressive is that top firing stereo speaker setup. So you'll notice you have a speaker grill on either side of the keyboard. And honestly, for a mid-range laptop, this is a very nice sounding speaker setup. Have a quick listen for yourself.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain.
With a price ranging between $750 to $1,000 US depending on the configuration you get, the Dell Inspiron 14 is more or less priced as a upper mid-range laptop. But in all fairness, you are getting a lot of value in return, which includes a high quality build with a metallic exterior. You also have a fantastic keyboard and great trackpad, something that you don't always find in this segment. You get a high quality full HD webcam and some of the best speakers I've again seen on a mid-range laptop. Though of course it has its fair share of problems, including a lackluster thermal system which is far too loud and far too hot. You also of course have less than ideal port standards, especially with that HDMI 1.4 port. And then of course the fact that the display here has such a low brightness and color rating leaves a lot to be desired. But I do think that Dell hits all the right check marks for a general productivity user. It is a respectable laptop. As long as you're willing to compromise on some of the problems I've mentioned, there is value to be had with this laptop. Though if you are again looking for a laptop better display, you may want to consider some of the alternatives like the HP Pavilion series, which lets you opt in for some more superior displays. But that's my honest take. Let me know what you think of the latest Inspiron 14 laptop if you're interested in getting one, or if you want me to review the Inspiron 14 2-in-1 in case you're interested in the touch version of this laptop. There's a lot to review as always. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you did enjoy the stuff you saw today. Catch you in the next one.